She wasn't born into greatness. She made herself unforgettable. A teacher, a nurse, a pioneer. Clara Barton was a woman who defied every expectation of her era. Known today as the founder of the American Red Cross, she spent her life chasing the wounded into the smoke of battlefields and comforting the forgotten in times of crisis. But who was she really? Let's step into the remarkable life of a woman who turned compassion into action and changed the world in the process. Clarissa Harlow Barton was born on Christmas Day in 1821 in North Oxford, Massachusetts. The youngest of 5 children, she was quiet, shy, and painfully timid, so much so that her parents feared she might not survive among the strong-willed. But Clara had something else: a watchful eye, a steady hand, and a heart that seemed to beat in rhythm with the suffering of others. When her brother David suffered a near-fatal head injury, it was 10-year-old Clara who nursed him back to health. She didn't flinch from the blood or the silence of sickness. She sat by his bed for nearly 2 years, applying leeches, changing dressings, feeding him. It was here that she first realized she had a gift, not for pity, but for action. In her early 20s, Clara became a teacher, even though women at the time rarely held positions of authority. Her discipline was fair, her presence commanding. She believed education should be free and public, a radical idea then. In 1852, she opened the first free public school in Bordentown, New Jersey. The students came, dozens, then hundreds. But when the school grew to 600 pupils, the school board hired a man to replace her as principal, doubling his pay. Clara resigned immediately. It was not just a matter of pride, it was a protest against injustice, against invisibility. She moved to Washington, D.C., where she worked at the U.S. Patent Office as a clerk. She was one of the first women in the federal government to receive equal pay to her male colleagues, until a new administration demoted and eventually fired her. She had tasted equality, only to see it snatched away. Then came April 1861. The Civil War erupted. Union troops poured into Washington, injured and broken, with no infrastructure to care for them. Hospitals were overwhelmed, supplies non-existent. Clara walked to the train station and saw soldiers lying on the floor, bleeding and afraid. She began collecting bandages, towels, lanterns, and food. She used her own money. She wrote home for donations. And then she went where no one expected a woman to go, to the battlefield. At the Battle of Cedar Mountain, she arrived with a wagon full of supplies just hours after the last shots were fired. The surgeons were amazed. One man reportedly asked, "Who is this woman?" Another replied, "She is the angel that rides in." The name stuck. The angel of the battlefield. She treated the wounded at Antietam, the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. Over 22,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing in one day. Clara worked from dawn to well past midnight. At one point, while bandaging a soldier's wounds, a bullet tore through her sleeve and killed the man she was treating. She did not stop. Blood soaked her skirts. Smoke choked her lungs. But she moved from man to man, whispering to the dying and reassuring the living. "Men said I was strong," she once recalled, "but I was only willing." After the war ended, Clara didn't rest. Families were desperate to know what had happened to their missing sons, husbands, and fathers. The military had no system for tracking the dead, so she made one. With permission from President Lincoln, she opened the Office of Missing Soldiers. Over 63,000 letters poured in. She read every one. She organized names, tracked movements, interviewed survivors, and personally helped locate more than 22,000 missing men. She brought closure to the brokenhearted, a different kind of healing. But her greatest contribution was yet to come. In 1869, exhausted and suffering from what we'd now call burnout, Clara traveled to Europe to rest. There, she learned of a new humanitarian movement, the International Red Cross, formed in the wake of the Geneva Convention. It wasn't just aid, it was structure, strategy, global coordination. She volunteered during the Franco-Prussian War and saw its effectiveness firsthand. She knew instantly, America needed this. Returning home, she campaigned to bring the Red Cross to the United States. For 9 long years, she lobbied Congress. She argued not just for wartime aid, but for disaster relief. Floods, fires, hurricanes. Crises didn't wait for wars. but officials were skeptical. The U.S. had not signed the Geneva Convention. Politicians dismissed her. She was a woman. Her ideas were too international, too ambitious. But Clara Barton didn't back down. In 1881, at the age of 59, she founded the American Red Cross. She became its first president and served for the next 23 years, unpaid. Under her leadership, the organization responded to catastrophes across the country: the Michigan forest fires, the Texas famine, the Sea Islands hurricane. She brought aid to Armenia, to Cuba, to wherever the need called. She never stayed behind a desk. She led from the front, often arriving in disaster zones before the government even acknowledged the crisis. Her trademark Red Cross pin became a symbol of hope to thousands. "You must never think of anything except the need," she said, "and how to meet it." She was not without critics. Some called her autocratic. Others said she refused to delegate. But she knew better than anyone how easily bureaucracy failed in moments of crisis. For Clara, saving time meant saving lives. In 1904, at the age of 82, she resigned from the Red Cross under pressure. It nearly broke her heart, but not her spirit. She spent her remaining years writing and advocating for civil rights, prison reform, and women's suffrage. She believed above all in human dignity. When she died in 1912 at age 90, Clara Barton was eulogized not just as a nurse or a founder, but as a force of nature. Her home in Glen Echo, Maryland became a museum. Her name entered textbooks, her face appeared on stamps. But her true legacy? It lives in every act of mercy, in every aid truck that crosses a flooded street, in every Red Cross worker who brings a blanket to someone who has lost everything. Clara Barton built a bridge between suffering and salvation, and she walked across it alone, again and again. "I have an almost complete disregard of precedent," she once wrote. "I simply cannot waste my time in getting the consent of men who might be inclined to look with favor upon the project. The possible slow death lies in its postponement." She didn't wait for the world to catch up. She led it forward. Clara Barton wasn't made by history. She made history possible.